and then I will turn it over to you, Karen.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. My name's Karen. I am the head of education here at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and we're very excited to share with you a little bit about river otters today. So I'm going to share my screen, and can you see that okay?
And just really quick, I'm sorry, I should have said that if you guys, oh, I see the thumbs up. Thank you guys. That's really helpful. If you guys have questions along the way, your teachers can put those in the chat and Karen will answer them towards the end. So if you have questions come up, let's get them out and then we'll address them at the end.
Okay, well, I'm going to get started. I call this Things You Oughter Know About River Otters. So I am at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, which is in Maryland, and I'm at this funny little circle here, not far from the water. We have a dock, and we're about the same distance from DC and Baltimore, so we're on the Chesapeake Bay. And I work with the Smithsonian, but we're not a museum. We are a research site and we have about 3,000 acres of land. We have a bunch of forest and wetlands, and we have about 200 staff and about 20 different research laboratories. And they work here on the Chesapeake Bay and also all over the world. And that's our main research building that you see right there. Some of our research includes things like fisheries conservation, so it's tracking sharks and fish. We have scientists that study sea level rise and the effect of marshes. We have people who study fish and invertebrates like crabs. We have scientists that work on ships and track the water in the hulls of ships as it moves around the world. We have scientists study orchids and plants, and even scientists that study the light from the sun and how it affects things like plankton and food webs in the Arctic. So all sorts of neat science here. Now, I am part of the education program, and I happen to have a dock. And down at our dock, I started to find some poop. And that's like, oh, poop. And I want to know what was pooing on my dock. And so I put out some trail cameras and I started to see something really neat, and that was river otters, which is what brought us to our topic today. River otters are a mammal, and they can help us understand if our ecosystems are in balance and how that affects the water that goes into our oceans and the Chesapeake Bay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And my question is, have you ever seen a river otter? Well, some people have, and some have seen them maybe even in DC. They're in the rivers there, and they were seen in the tidal basin, but they're nocturnal, meaning they come mostly out at night and around dawn and dusk. So not everyone has seen one, but they are around more commonly than you think. There are about 17 different species of otters in the world. Now, there are two that are found here in the US, and that's the river otter and the sea otter. Now, the sea otter is actually endangered, but the river otter is of least concern, but they're very important for understanding the health of our food webs. And I just wanted to give you a little picture of the difference between the two so that you know which one we're working with. So our river otters, they live on land and water, but our sea otters are only in water. And our river otters that I'm talking about only get up to about 33 pounds, which is like a small dog, whereas your sea otters can get up to 90 pounds. That's really big. And then our otters can move on land and water, and they can poo on land, which is very important for us in just a little bit. And then our sea otters as well, they just stay in the water all the time, and they have flipper feet for swimming, and they have these cool little flat feet, almost like a cat, and they have retractable claws like a cat too, which is kind of neat as well. But we're going to focus in on this guy, the river otter, today. So they can live in freshwater or marine habitats, so in saltwater or freshwater. They mostly like freshwater, though. And here in the bay, they can be around some brackish, which is that mixture of salt and freshwater. They really like unpolluted and clean water. So if river otters are around, that means the water's probably pretty healthy. And they are in the weasel family, which I think is pretty funny. But they are in the same family as skunks and other weasels, and they do have smelly glands, but they don't make smells like a skunk. And they can get up to about 5 feet long. And if you look at the maps here, the sea otters are only found in the Pacific area, and the river otters can be found across the US, and they're being introduced in some places. So I talked about having a dock, and I started seeing some poo on the dock, and I put out some trail cameras because I saw these neat footprints, and we started seeing some fun images that gave us an idea that river otters were around. So here's a video of two of our boys, and they're playing, but it gives us an idea of who was around. They like to play a lot. And I can recognize one of them because he has a bent tail. We call him Crooktail. And Crooktail's the only one I can recognize because they don't really have any way to tell them apart other than this guy who has a little bent tail. So you can see they're perfectly made for swimming in water. They have those long tails. They are paddle-like in terms of giving them direction. They have webbed feet for steering, and they're perfectly made for looking for their food. And we're going to talk about their food in just a minute. They can travel in all weathers. So this is our boys at the dock sliding around. And a group of otters is called a romp, which I think is one of the best words ever for a group of animals. So you can see these rolling around. They have a good time. And part of the reason they come up on land to roll around is also to get air into their fur and to dry off so that they can stay more floaty, more buoyant. And also, I think it's just really fun. Can you see all three of them there? And they're kind of grooming their fur a little bit as they drag themselves along. So we saw these images on our docks and we got pretty excited. So I went and started talking to one of our scientists about why are these otters here and what does it mean? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Should we be worried? And our scientists were very excited. And so I started showing them some of our videos and we started sort of talking, what could we do with this information? So we started putting more and more trail cameras around and observing their behavior and finding the places where they were pooing. And that's important because we can learn a lot of information from their poo. And I'll get more into that in a second. But we learned a lot when we were putting those trail cameras out that we had to tie down our cameras because they're very curious. You see this one here? And they do make vocalizations and sounds. These are being quiet, but they make a variety of chirps and chitters and little grunts and things. You might hear them later on. But right now they're just having fun playing with my camera. But back behind them on the dock is what we call an otter latrine. It's a place where they leave their markings to sort of leave a Facebook for other otters of information. So they're pooing there, but it tells other otters a lot about them and who's there. And you can tell this one was very obsessed with my camera. But you see the other two otters in the background there. So we did find out that the pups come around late December and April. In the Chesapeake Bay, it seems to be that they start to breed somewhere in February to March. We start to see them doing that. And the interesting thing is this, I was researching it with the scientists and nobody's really done much work on the otters of the Chesapeake Bay. This is part of what got our scientists excited that we had them on our dock and that we were seeing them in other places because nobody had really done much out there. And so sometimes people say, well, haven't we discovered all the things out in nature? Don't scientists know all the things? Well, they don't. Even things as big as river otters, we didn't know much about, and we're still learning about. So we talked with people at the National Zoo and we talked with our scientists, and they used a word that was kind of neat. And they said otters are kind of like a flagship species. And that just means that they're really charismatic, they're really cute, and they can be a rallying point for protecting our waters and the Chesapeake Bay and the waters that go into the oceans that you all study, right? Because they are cute and people want to take care of them. And so we use them for education, like what I do, and to learn more about the health of the water. So I was working with Dr. Katrina Lohan, and she studies marine diseases and parasites and the health of the water. And so that relates directly to river otters because if they're eating fish and other things that are not healthy, then the otters won't be healthy. And so she was excited about learning about their diet and what they eat, and if there are any parasites in their poo and where that may be coming from, if it's coming from the fish that they're eating or the water. And so we started talking about what we could do to study them. And so she started collecting their scat. Now, one single otter poo is called a spraint, like a sprained ankle. But more than two in one place is called a latrine. And so a latrine is just where a bunch of otters all poo together. And like I said, it's kind of like social media for otters. They leave their poo and other otters can smell it and figure out how many are there and if it's male or female and if they're healthy and a whole bunch of other information. And so that scat can give us a neat window into the diet of what otters eat and if they are healthy or not, and if the food they're eating is healthy or not. So this is some scat that I dried. We can actually look at the bones and the fish scales inside that scat, even some worms, if there are worms in there, to see what's going on. So these are some of the things that we know otters eat, from fish and turtles to mussels to crabs. I've seen them eat ducks. They're very opportunistic. That means they eat what they can find depending on the season. And so this is a part of the food web, and I want to put river otters back into diagrams of the food web because most people leave them out when they think about the Chesapeake Bay. They don't think about river otters, but they are an important part of the predators that eat fish and ducks and other creatures that live in the Chesapeake Bay. And that includes some sightings of the otters here. They're actually eating an invasive species, a fish called a snakehead. So you can see the big fish that they're eating, and that's a good thing because they're eating some fish that are harmful to our environments, and that tells us a lot about how helpful they are. And some of our video cameras showed us some neat new things we'd never seen before, like river otters eating blue crabs. So you can see this one's really obsessed with my camera. They really like to play with cameras. But if you watch in the background, you're going to see a couple come up with a crab. See the crab in the background? Oh, it looks like the crab's winning. There he goes. And this one is still playing with my camera. Now watch carefully in the very back here. You're going to see them come back up. I think they're fighting with the crab off camera. We can't see it, but I think they're trying to subdue it or get it ready to be eaten back there off the camera. But they'll be right back up. And I want you to watch when they eat it, they throw their head back and they use the back teeth in their mouth. They have all sharp teeth for eating, carnassial teeth. But those are just chewing teeth that are very sharp for eating meat and for food. So check this one out. Oh, that crab looks pretty tired now. They don't share very well though, which is something we learned by watching these videos too. But you can see they do enjoy a good crab. We've also seen some other types of food. If you watch carefully here, you can see one otter has a little bit of a duck. That's the one on the far right side. And the one on the left side has an eel. And they're each eating, they'll turn around in a minute, but you can see the other otter come up here and see if they could get a little bit to share, but they don't share very well. They eat a lot of different things. And it just depends on the time of year. The females typically travel by themselves or with a pup, but the males, especially in the wintertime and the fall, travel in these groups. But come spring and summer, they'll disperse and go a different way. You can see the eel over here on the far side, but they're not sharing their food with their friends. But check this out. We found some new behaviors by watching and using our trail cameras of something called kleptoparasitism, which is just a big word meaning another animal likes to steal their food. So look at the size of this fish and watch what happens to this guy's lunch. You've never seen this before. Back, look at the eyes. There he comes. Oh, and he stole his lunch. So the raccoon is very cheeky. And these two look like, hey, where did my lunch go? And we didn't know that this would happen. So even just putting out these trail cameras gave us a window into what's happening with the interactions of the raccoons and the otters between the two. Oh, it's playing again. Okay, 2 seconds here. I love this video. So watch in the back, here he comes. And so one of our scientists, who's a behavior scientist, is actually studying this, looking at how this interaction works. Oh, and here's another one. The raccoon scares the otter into the water, grabs his fish, and runs off. But it's a very big fish, so it takes him a minute. I would think that the otter would win, but apparently these raccoons are pretty cheeky and really good at stealing the fish from the otters. So we learn about otter diet by putting out these trail cameras and by collecting the poo. It gives us a window into what they're eating, and it helps us understand the balance of what's happening in the ecosystems, like where the otters live. And it all came from curiosity and asking a question about the scats that is on our dock, why it's there, what's happening there, and then, is the stuff that we're finding and that they're eating healthy? And do the otters look healthy? And, what information can we gather from not only the videos, but from the scat itself? And that can tell us, are our waters in balance? Are they healthy? Are the otters healthy? And how does that affect the health of what goes into our rivers and eventually into our oceans? And with that, I will take some questions. I know that was super quick, but I will stop sharing and take some questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to get some questions from the students, but maybe I will start you off. So besides otters and raccoons, have you seen any other animals on your trail cam?
Oh, I have. Guess what I've seen? I have seen foxes, and I have seen weasels, and I've seen mice, I've seen gulls, but get this, our scientists have figured out that at those otter latrines where all that poo is, that other animals, other predators, you all know what the word predator is. So those are animals that eat other animals. So other predators like to poo on top of or pee on top of the otter latrines. They don't roll in it, they don't eat it, but they poo on it and they leave messages for each other. And so it's thought that that might be a way that we could study populations of things like foxes and grizzlies and wolves and other animals that like to leave messages there too, which is pretty neat that we can use the otter latrines to study other predators without ever having to capture them. We can just see them on our trail cameras. So that's a lot of neat information. And I've even seen that here. We've seen foxes and raccoons poo right on top of the otter stuff, which sounds gross, but it's a lot of neat information. Okay, other questions?
I
I see some hands.
Yeah, we see some hands. So if you guys want to bring a student up or put it in the chat, that's up to you. See lots of hands, lots of curious students.
And I hope that you all will keep asking good questions, because scientists really are just people that love to solve puzzles, right? And you all can solve puzzles by asking good questions and by following up, just like we did, by trying to study what's out there and figure out what's happening in the environment that may be affecting our oceans or our bay.
Miss DeVivo, let's see, I got one in the chat. Do otters mark their territories? Is that what they're
Yes,
doing?
and that's what that latrine is those latrines are marking the territory. Now, what's interesting is we found they mostly do that in the fall and in the winter, but in the spring and summer, when they don't need to mate anymore or find each other, they actually travel and they stop pooing in the same places to mark their territory as much. So they mostly do it during the times when they're trying to mate or find other otters. And so they start pooing in the water. And we found that out by asking the people at the National Zoo, and their otters at the zoo do the same thing, is because we stopped seeing the latrines in the spring and we wanted to know why. And so that was why.
Interesting. I got another question. What type of fish do the otters eat?
Oh, that's a good one. They really like a variety of things, but ours like to eat minnows, but they also like American shad, which are very big. So picture from your tip of your finger to your elbow, they like fish that size. They're really big and they're good at catching them. Do you remember seeing the otter and the raccoon stealing his fish? That was a big fish and they can eat some very big ones. So they like shad and they like things like striped bass and they'll like sunfish. So a whole bunch of different things. It depends on what's around.
Another question. Why didn't the otter fight back with the raccoon?
You know, that's a good question. That's what our scientists are trying to figure out. And you know, what's interesting is you all could someday grow up and help us figure that out because we've got cameras out there and we've got some scientists looking at it, but they haven't figured it out yet. And so that's one of the mysteries that we're going to need some help solving eventually. So if you like studying animals, that might be one that you could help us figure out. And we think it's maybe because there's so much food out there that it's not worth fighting and getting hurt for, that it's better to just let the fish go and then just go catch some more than to have to fight, which kind of makes sense, right? So maybe it's just easier.
Hmm. I mean, he seemed pretty upset. There were definitely some vocalizations, right?
Yeah, he was not happy about it, but he also wasn't going to fight too hard.
Um, we got, so what are some of the predators? What animals eat otters, and do otters ever eat other otters?
Oh, good. Yeah. So otters can, when they're adults, they don't get eaten by many things. It's mainly when they're pups or babies. And remember that word that I used, pup? That's what a baby otter is called. And so when a pup is little, it could be taken by anything from an eagle to a fox to a coyote, but it's very rare. Now, sea otters, the ones that live in the sea, they get chased by orcas and whales and other larger things. So they have to watch out for bigger predators and animals. But ours mostly are only in danger when they're little. But once they get big, they can defend themselves pretty well because they've got big teeth.
That's great. So I know that one of our schools is right near the Hudson River. Do you happen to know if we have otters in the Hudson River?
You know what? I bet they are there. I don't know 100%, but we do have something. We have an otter spotter website where we have people put in when they see otters, and our scientists are collecting information on that because remember I said that we didn't know much about where they are in the Chesapeake Bay. So right now we have people when they see an otter or they find a picture of one, like they take a picture of one near them, they can put it into our website and we start building a map of where all the otters are. And then our scientists can go out and put out cameras or they can collect scat and poo to learn more about those otters out there.
Very cool. What is your favorite kind of otter?
Oh, I'm partial to river otters. That's just because. But the have any of you ever seen the little small clawed otters? They're at the National Zoo. They're very small. I like small clawed otters, but you know what? They're threatened because a lot of people like them so much that they've made them into pets and they've taken them from the wild and they're endangered now. And so I really like to remind people that otters are not good pets because they're wild animals, and it's better to leave them out in the wild. So if you see videos or Facebook pages where people have otters as pets, I don't like liking those videos because they shouldn't be pets at all. It's better to have them in the wild or in populations in zoos where they're trying to make enough babies and young to release them back out into the wild to help the populations.
That makes sense. Can you tell us a little bit about your career path and how you got into this kind of work and how long you've been researching otters as well and learning about them?
Yeah. So, you know what? I started as a scientist studying bats and birds, and eventually I studied fossils a little bit, but I found out I was really good at teaching and I like teaching outdoors. So, my job is to take kids just like you outside and I take you into the water, I take them into the forest, and I teach all about nature, but in our outside classroom. And I really enjoy that, but I still like to do science. And so sometimes I put out trail cameras or I do my own science because I think it's fun and I want to keep doing it. But it happened to be that the trail cameras I put out there led to this cool study where we connected with the scientists and where we connected to the public now posting their sightings. And so it's neat because just one person putting out a trail camera can start a whole chain of events like that going on now across the Smithsonian and the whole Chesapeake Bay.
That's amazing. That's definitely really inspiring too, that like,
Mhm.
you can learn just about like your own area from just one little piece of technology and
Mhm.
learn so much. That's really cool. What about like, so you mentioned that you worked with a behaviorist and like was it a parasitologist?
Yep.
Have there been other scientists that have also been looking at the otters and working with you?
You know, most of the scientists that I've worked with are the ones doing the parasites in the poo. We have some that are doing the behavior, and then we're working with the people at the National Zoo. And get this, our scientists at the National Zoo let us put cameras in the exhibit with the otters. So we're comparing the behavior of the otters at the zoo in captivity to the otters in the wild, which is pretty neat because we get to work with the people at the zoo and the people in the wild and the scientists. We get to do it all, which is fun because we can learn a lot. So if you all go to the zoo, you can visit their otters and look and see if there are any cameras in the enclosure because you might actually see some of the equipment our scientists use.
And have you noticed any similarities or differences in the different otter population, like the wild otters versus the zoo otters?
Yeah, mostly, it's very similar behavior. And that's where we learned about when they poo. Do they poo in the water or do they poo on the land? And they mostly poo on land in the winter and in the fall. And that taught us a lot because the keepers told us how the captive otters behave, and that helped us figure out how the otters in the wild were behaving, right? So if you all like this type of science and you are interested in becoming scientists, then I would suggest that you start asking questions now. Look around your backyard, look around your school, try to learn about what's in your environment. Even if you're in a city or if you're in a playground, there's nature all around us, and each of us can be a scientist. And just ask questions and start to try to figure out the puzzle of what's happening right there in your own backyard.
I think that is great advice for our young scientists. Are there any, oh, I see one more. Do
Okay.
you have a least favorite otter?
Oh, a least favorite otter. No, I love them all. Although the one that fascinates me most is the giant sea otter or the giant otter, which it's huge. It's 100 plus pounds, but it's super endangered because people are kind of afraid of it. And I believe I can't remember what country it's in, but it's beautiful. It's just very, very large, and I think people are afraid of it because it's big.
Mhm.
But they're harmless. They're just fish eaters.
Okay. Well, I appreciate I learned a lot about river otters that I had no idea about, and I'm sure our students did as well. And thank you for answering all of their questions. I know our classes are getting ready to pack up for dismissal, so I want to make sure that they can do that. But thank you, Karen. We appreciate you. And thank you, students, for your great questions and for your attention today. I hope
Thank
you
you for
enjoyed it.
coming. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.